During my higher education days, I was very successful in the English language course and was able to teach other friends simple phrases at school. However, I was a little naughty, helping them to pass their English exams. Even during our primary school days, we often frequented other American or English cultural lending libraries, even though my comprehension of the language was limited without the use of dictionaries. I borrowed many books, particularly on subjects of astronomy, space exploration, and flight. At high school, I borrowed literature on history in regard to the beginnings of human civilizations. This not only helped me and my brother to improve our learning more about the language of the angels, but also taught us all about the exciting prospects of flight and the beauty of other galactic and planetary systems. By doing so, it felt as if we were still connected to our beginnings outside the Earthian realm. I always believed that every one of us came from the stars. For my brother and me, it was like touching home and remembering our past. We were two unusual young boys whose interests were different. For others around us, we had boyish interests and were regarded as dreamers. During my high school days, I organized a space club and rocket club and started to publish small pamphlets about space exploration and also about what others around the world were trying to achieve. The subjects I covered were usually on journeying to the moon and other planets within our solar system. I used to borrow 16mm films documenting the subjects I was keenly interested in, showing them to the rest of the school, thus exciting the other students and younger teachers. Some of the older teachers were not pleased, but could do nothing about it. I even took the projectors I borrowed from the American library home and showed a few of those films at our aunt's place, to the amazement of our cousins, who forever considered my brother and me as idiotic and brainless boys. Perhaps it made them feel superior, and they may have been reflecting our father. Our mother, on the other hand, showed us ways to appreciate color and visual design, and that started my interest in drawing and painting. I remember the colorful and glossy Russian calendar our father once brought home. It had been given to him as a Christmas and New Year's gift depicting the mining industry in Russia. It had illustrations of caverns dug in the depths and toy workers happily digging for coal and other worthy minerals. It looked so exciting that it created the impression that our father was probably changing for the better. He smiled, and it meant the world to us, but it did not last long, for soon he was back to his usual self. On another occasion, he brought some color pencils home, obviously given to him to pass on to us. They were colorful and shiny, made by Faber-Castell. We were so happy until, of course, he told me what I should do with them, literally telling me to stick them into my arse. You can imagine how it made me feel. I thought that maybe I should do that and show him how it looked, just to embarrass him, but I was not going to sink to that level. At the next opportunity I could perhaps tell him that he should keep his color pencils and stick them up his own arse. However, I would probably face the risk of being hit. That opportunity did arise, and I told him just that. He said nothing, perhaps shocked about that response from me, the young boy he disliked. He ate, drank, and always kept away, completely uninterested in us. Sadly, we always felt that, in truth, we had no father. Our mother always filled the gap and became both parents. Another memory, which still plagues me, originates from my primary school days. There were times when I was laughed at by a number of other boys because I had curly reddish hair and looked different. When it was cold and frosty, I used to cover my head with a scarf, as my mother insisted. Obviously, she did not want us to develop head colds. I did not take things too seriously even when they called me a girly boy. There were those who tried to bully me, but could not get anywhere with their efforts, instead becoming friends. I suppose I had a very different effect on them. For instance, when a bully approached me, I kept extremely cool, calmly suggesting the hardest thing for them to do, and instead of fighting, we could become good friends. Why did one need to create enemies? As one can see, my influence on others had to be always different. That was, and still is, my nature. Wherever I go, peace has to accompany me, for peace is still my best friend. Although I almost always enjoyed sporting activities, my main interest remained more academic and artistic. I loved discoveries of and learning about new things, as well as inventing. Drawing images of things and people around me was one of my prime interests. During the late 1950s, I was considered to be one of the taller boys and encouraged to play basketball. Some others thought that I must be in a more senior class, perhaps even a student at high school when I was still at primary. When subjected to exams during my high school days, my knowledge was considered above average, and they recommended putting me in a more advanced class. But there were also some teachers who wanted to fail me, perhaps due to racial factors, without success. I have been told, not only by a number of educators, but also others like my mother's friends, that I apparently had an unusually strong presence, but at the same time I could not understand what all the fuss was about. This trend remained for a long while, although I always avoided making big waves. On the other hand, our father, as well as our cousins, considered me and my brother as being completely brainless weaklings. We both never bothered to correct this misconception. As for me, I preferred to remain completely neutral, believing that they too would one day discover that what they popularly desired to downgrade or underestimate was not as they imagined. On the contrary, even then I could only accept everyone as they were. I suppose that by laughing at us and considering me as a joke figure, they imagined themselves as being supreme. Were they not older and supposedly wiser, partially being encouraged to feel that way by my mother? I really feel that my first cousin, even now in his mature age, still feels the same as he once did, for he never contacts me or responds to my correspondence, yet still communicates with my brother. He may have different issues of personal concern. However, as far as I'm concerned, he remains a distant foreigner. And that is most certainly his choice. I favorably remember when my aunt, mother, brother, and I went to see a film in the city. We were ushered to the presidential seats in a reserved balcony. This was where only dignitaries would be allowed. Every time we have been ushered into such reserved seats, I was very surprised. When everybody in the audience turned to us in reverence, it made me feel a little unnerved, and whenever I questioned it, Neither my aunt nor mother would explain anything other than deliberately asking if we had enjoyed the film. But the films they chose were mainly of the romantic kind, and we boys were not really interested in them. I personally preferred historic or science fiction. What interested me most was that whilst people from the audience tried to reach and talk to us, bodyguards stopped them. I could not understand what was going on. Obviously, they had no idea about our real background. There were a number of occasions when we were taken in black limousines with luxurious interiors to places where some important people were gathered. There were small orchestras with a grand piano playing classical music of the most beautiful kind. The only response from my aunt, when questioned why everybody was so beautifully dressed, talking to each other with so much respect and following a certain etiquette, was just a smile and a soft whisper that one day I would understand. I have still not discovered anything extraordinary yet, and am puzzled. Obviously, there was something about my parents I was not to question. Those rather interesting occasions kept happening from time to time, but our father, for some unknown reason, never wanted to share the experience. One other intriguing issue that occupied my mind was when my mother made mention of something even more puzzling. She told me that we should, in reality, be dwelling in a mansion, or perhaps a palace, but nothing could be done about it now. We needed to accept what was and what our probable future would be. I was unsure what it meant. I could not question her, for she would never again talk about it. Neither she nor her sister spoke anything of it any more, and they appeared to have made a vow. I could not understand the whole situation then, and still cannot. It simply remains a secret. She was neither joking nor responding to my attitude towards our living standards, or the humble dwelling we occupied at the time. But in reality I rather liked the rustic looks of things therein. At one stage, when still very young, and living on the other side of the city, on one fiery occasion of frustration, I just walked away from the situation to escape imminent chastisement. I walked along unending roads for hours to my aunt's address on the opposite side of town. By doing so, I caused a huge stir and anxiety, although it was not my intention. My mother must have panicked, inquiring through the police. A search party was apparently sent out to look for me, but I was already at my destination, where my aunt thought I must have taken the bus, although that was not the case, for I had walked the whole way. My aunt had already been in touch with her sister, who was worried and fearful. When my mother finally arrived, she expressed her sadness in a few simple words. She advised me not to do anything like that ever again, for she was so worried. I knew I should not have done so, but I did, and that was it.